I want to depict a quick concept here which could help clarify the way things are. Everything is actually a 50-50 transcendence or neutral reality, which is split or polarized into one or the other depending on the observer. It's actually inherently neither one or the other, or it's actually both. And the observer collapses reality into one or the other. And this works for each concept of perception, and then each perception that we have access to up into creating a whole reality. And when people have a combined group or collective similarity of perceptual polarizations, we have a collective reality. And, you know, just look out to the few of multiple people, a group that doesn't fit into the whole, or look out to the one person who doesn't fit in any of the groups. And just not just through social, you know, like identity, but literally one who is capable of transcending the concepts, the limitations, the perceptual boundaries, and you can always exaggerate the concepts to bring out the meaning. So just think of like a monk who's completely out of his mind compared to people who are in the city and know what's going on, and they're the highest technology and all that, and they're actually medically, psychologically insane. You know, verifiably insane. And the monk's actually who's nuts is at peace and healthy. So it means this reality is collective because we're agreeing on the same thing, and in reality it's inherently neutral. But the idea then is that when you bring, and this is going to be real vague, but that's the kind of foundation for non-duality, when you bring the polarity from one end or the other down to a neutrality with whatever it is, you bring about a transcendent state. One way to look at that is, the easiest way is how everything's set up, it's designed to represent this. And nature and the way physiological functions operate, it's like it's spelling it out in front of us. I said in another video, probably like 4 or 5 videos back, that is kind of like going, since we're sensing through the body is sensing the environment, and the body is sensing the environment by detecting stimulus, which is interacting with the nerves themselves and being interpreted by the brain. So in a way, we're sensing the energy of the body, which is being altered by the environment, and so we're sensing ourself as the environment, or through the environment, or the environment through ourselves. The boundary gets really dissolved. And although it works, but when you look for the boundary, when you try and break it down, when is a person born? When are they conscious? When do they technically die? You know, brain activity or heartbeat or whatever it is. When does one moment, one boundary end and the next part begin? There's always a gradient of the true definition. And so the idea is that it's only one or the other when we pick it, when we choose that boundary to be the way we're going to view reality. And it's usually through the self that determines what boundaries we'll then perceive in reality with others or with the environment. And so in a way, with us sensing the environment as ourselves, it's like when we go into nature and we're immersed in these cycles, these rhythmic beatings of stimulus, it's as if we are going into ourselves. And so, ourselves and ourself. As well, it's just a self. It's one self that we're all kind of communally sharing or contributing to. In essence, there is no real boundary, because if you draw the boundary, then you've cut out some other aspect of it. If you cut out some other aspect of it, it's not the true self. And it's the same with space-time or the universe. If you get it all in one part, well, guess what? You had to cut out something to get that, and so then you can't actually view the whole thing in one go. It's a paradox. But the idea is that since we get these responses when we go into nature, where we kind of go into our mind, and we view reality and sensory input or stimulus differently, and we observe ourselves differently, and eventually we go into another state of consciousness, a transcendent state. It's as if we're going into our mind when we go physically into nature, because nature is an extension of our being, our body, And just as I mentioned in the other video where I talked about this, there's a variance in belief where some believe that that's because we'll dissolve if we fully go into nature. What happens when you die, or physically, well, you get absorbed into the streams and the dirt and all that, and what if that happens mentally? Well, there's no more you. So the goal is not to fully immerse yourself, but to observe that boundary and learn how to maintain yourself within that immense sea of probabilities and change and stimulus. The idea is we're kind of going within ourselves, and the boundary between one or the other it's dissolved, or it's made very, very thin, or it's made see-through, or it's made like it's on a scalable sliding scale platform where it's like jello, it moves. And so the idea is that whenever we have something that we believe we're defining through perceptual interpretation, it's actually just a particular perspective that we're attributing to a given situation. And it means and there's always a situation that is completely contradictory to the one that we perceive to be the truth in that situation. And so where I'm going with this is that look at I'll give some examples of basic concepts which relate to perceptions and stimulus. So look at hot and cold, and the basic idea is that, or the primary idea, the premise is that there's actually no such thing as hot and cold. There is simply heat and the absence of heat, and it's the same with every other aspect, for the most part, with light and dark, and it gets kind of weird with high and low and things like that. But the basic idea is there, the premise that where we have in this world of duality a contrast through physical perception, the biological processing system, we have one and then the other, and in actuality, in the duality of one and the other, there's actually only one. There's a transcendence, or a non-duality, and it's presenting itself, it's hiding itself behind the duality, or you could say that our brain is converting it into a duality because it has no way of perceiving non-duality, which gives us a strange paradox about why we're here and how that came about in the first place. Because how does such a system emerge in the first place if everything is actually non-dual and there are multiple wavelengths of spectrums of information, and we emerge to deal with just one in the here and now? What particularly was so special about this one that that's the one we emerged around? If it emerged through, if it was just accident, okay, well, that's just saying I don't have an answer, so it's an accident. It makes no sense. There's something there, something guided it into being. There's some reason behind it, and that reason will tell us about how the whole system works, and more so about creation and how you get such a system out of basically there not being such a system there before. Or what it'll probably tell us is that there's never not such a system. There's the fact that there's not a polarized version, and we go from non-duality into polarized, conceptual, a biologically biased view, and then back into non-duality, which is some type of spiritual essence. But the idea, I don't want to get too far into intelligent design or whatnot, but the idea is that if you have the duality and you look at it and you see there's really one way you can exemplify this is to draw the line perfectly in between one extreme and the other. For instance, if you're perfectly between hot and cold, what are you? And you can play with yourself and do this. And, people might say there's something strange about that, or, it's unanswerable, but you can do this. Find bath water, and I'm leading up to something as well. Find bath water. Find the temperature, and, get the temperature just right so it's in the middle. Perceptually, sensorily, or sensually, and you'll find something interesting happens. There's a null zone where your body doesn't know how to interpret it, and it feels like you're floating in air. It feels like there's no difference between the air and the water, and then your body temperature. And that's where, basically, where you reduce contrast, where the contrast between one or the other is nullified, that's where you find non-duality. Hint, is that you do that with your mind and the environment, and you literally become the environment. But without going too far ahead, I'll show you how that's done. So with hot and cold and physical, tactile sensations, sensory stimulus, and then eventually you get into mentality. But for that to happen, or cognition, for that to happen, and then time dilation, you have to first perform this transcendence of the physical stimulus. And there are many methods for that. There are even early methods where there are yogic methods, and you can search. There's one video, The Hidden Teachings of Jesus Christ, and you can find basically yogic, how the ancient books are coded to describe yogic functions of the human body, of basically Christ fluid moving about the solar system, your body, and creating a solar eclipse, if you will, or an enlightening. And so it has to do with self-discipline, abstinence, food intake and fasting, and concentrated, like single-mindedness or focused practices, and then yogic practices of cleaning the organ system. But you'll end up activating these types of states, and when that happens, just like basically you have the hot and cold duality, where you have the same thing with past and present and future. There's like two dualities there. What happens when you navigate to the neutral point of both of those, and you're neither in the past or in the present or focused on either end? You actually, like, it's the perception of freezing time, and that moment that you're in lasts forever. It seems to last forever, and it's as if it's like 2 or 3 actually scales that kind of like they go like that. It's kind of like they're braiding themselves into time, and if you freeze them, or if you there's like an interplay. If you get them to relax, that process stops, but time continues to go. So it's like you teleport to wherever you're focusing in the moment. If you're just sitting still, then you literally sit still, and it's as if you take an eraser and drag it along the line of time, or the strip of time, and that moment stretches on forever. It's the strangest thing, but that's the beginning of time dilation. It comes from a detachment from your personal perceptual system. Why? There's a few theories and reasons, but it's a form of breaking through the perceptual barrier that keeps you limited within a particular conscious view, which is actually a type of perceptual illusion. Because we're actually not in a conscious view. That's the part that's the illusion. We just think we are, and it's a very good, persistent illusion. But because it's an illusion, there are ways to nullify it, to navigate into another viewpoint. The idea is you can demonstrate this with hot and cold, water in a bath, and getting a lukewarm water in a bath. It's like the only time you want to be lukewarm. And it feels like you're floating. So you can do this anywhere. You can, once you do it enough, you can lie down, put a blanket over you, as long as the room's not too hot or too cold, and focus. This is a practice. Focus on every point of your skin that is touching the blanket, until you end up with a huge mile-long stretch of points that are your sensory input, your nerves basically touching the blanket. And because it is kind of like it's like a cloud-based sensory system to have millions of nerves, okay, you're not going to fill all millions of them. You feel like a cloud of nerves, but when you begin to focus more and more and more, your brain will start to pick out specific finite points to plot that sensory input out. And when you focus more and more on that and play that, or expand that, it will basically grow to expand all of your perceptual vision until you're literally a sheet of neurons and nerve cells that seems like it's 1,000,000 miles long. You basically play your perceptions out. It's kind of like a natural trip of sorts. And when you do that, eventually you get like to a doorway where it's like weird neuron field place, and then sea of expanse, something elseness, and you can deviate between the two. But when you're immersed fully in this one, not thinking about it, you can't really pop out. It doesn't work that way. And the goal is not necessarily to pop out and do anything. Some people say when you pop out, well, something else can jump in. So, you know, you always want to be protected. The goal is to realize that it's a sheet of millions of billions of neurons, not hand, foot. That's not what it is. It's neurological data, or data. I always do that. And seeing it from what we think it is the perceptual illusion, the avatar, or the ghost in the machine version. It's the program, the operating system that's running. It's there, but it's the graphical user interface. Really, there's data being processed. And seeing it from the data processing level allows us to incubate ideas and reality, and as well come to terms with what we're really being faced with. Because once you see it from that level, the illusions are not as convincing. They're just as real, but you can see there's something so much more. So the idea with the hot and cold of the water, as well, if you once you do that enough, you can do it with just a blanket, or you can do it just lying still. That's falling asleep basically while staying awake. You lie still enough, and you kind of merge between the air and your skin, and the boundary disappears, and you feel like you're, you know, vibrating into the room. And there's a study on that as well. And the brain is designed to do that. You know, there's a study where a person can be sat there, and somebody behind them has, or somebody in front of them, that's the person, and then there's somebody behind them with the camera looking at them, and I think I explained it wrong, but somebody on camera will be recorded being poked in the back. I think it's that person, the actual person is behind them with the camera. I'm explaining it wrong, but basically they'll see on the camera somebody being poked, and the brain will create the sensation of them being poked in the back, because the brain tries to correlate what they're seeing with what they're feeling. And the brain will do that. It fills in the gaps all the time. These are perceptual illusions, gestalt perceptions. It does that. It's doing that 65% of the time. I just made that up, but it's actually, that's from, you know, psychology class and things like that. It's actually much more often than we think, to the point where just pretty much not being made up. That is 65% of the time. It's actually, I'm pretty sure it's a lot higher, where we think we're seeing perceptions, we're seeing the finalized view of things. If you were to strip out all the neurological processing, it would look like a 3D game that wasn't fully rendered, where our brain is filling in the shading and the realism. It's making it seem real, but it's really not. And then there is certain things. I wanted to do a video where they had these AI systems in the bases looking at reality, and when you turn your observational ability away, your presence away, these AI systems watch reality, and if there's no souled beings in the area, reality begins to break down in a series of gradients of processing power until you end up with just a wireframe view of the city or whatever it is. So when enough people get out of an area, it turns into wireframe mode because it's a simulated reality. The idea is, what I was describing with the water and even the blanket, is a isolation or deprivation chamber, sensory deprivation chamber. When you go into those, the water is the same temperature as the air and the same temperature as water, and then the water the same temperature as your skin. So it's all one temperature all the way through, and then it's filled with salt, super saturated, so you float on it. At that point, you feel nothing. You can't feel anything. You can't hear, see, or feel anything. It's all one big block, one big temperature, and your brain can't determine the difference between you, the water, and the air. It's all one thing. That's how you force it to happen. You do that, your brain is like it's a cartoon slipping on marbles or something. It can't get a grip. It throws you into your own internal hyperspace. The idea is that that's transcendence. That's all that is that's found through transcendence, through neutralizing the polarity of one boundary, or one system with a boundary, and another system with a boundary. Once you do that, you get unlimited experiential variation. Whatever you think appears in front of you, and you beam there. That's what I wanted to say. So I'm going to draw something up. I'll either put it in this video, or I'll make another video explaining it. So now imagine you have the previous video, 50-50 technology and organic material. Okay, you got the universe. It's hard, rocky, cold, chemical, dead, inanimate. Then you got organic matter within the universe, soft, mushy, warm, wet, living, feeling. Okay, you put them together, you get the universe. I kind of said that wrong, but that's the idea. It's one and the other. It's not one or the other, it's one and the other. So at that point, though, you can't say, no, it's just one and then the other. You get the universe is dead, then people, they're happy and alive. People are from the universe. That's how it works. It doesn't make any sense. So the universe itself is a non-living, dead machine person thing. Plant, tree, organism, rock being. Like, that's the whole point. It's a transcendent being. So the idea is that this is the proposal, basically. Say you have, so I'll just put it out there. You got two lines. One's a line that's your memory from birth to death, organic memory. Then you got the secondary line. That's your wherever you are after death. Okay, you got the simulated memory, which is you brought into a system, and you live on from there for however a billion years. The point is, or more, until the whole universe loops back around and you have another organic life, and then you do it again and again and again. And this one, the computerized consciousness, is the one that exists when this universe is not in the Big Bang, basically, which is an illusion. It's just like saying a big wakefulness where you woke up from a dream and blew the universe into existence. But every time there's a physical universe there, you have organic stretch, and then it crunches back down and you have a technological experience. Then it loops back around eternally, basically. The idea is that eternal one, or the higher dimensional one, which the simulators can be used as a gateway to, exists every time the physical one isn't there. And it exists there too, but your focus is here. How would you get it so that you exist in both as one? Pause it if you want to try and answer that. So the idea, what is it if it's 50-50? If you have one long stretch of organic life and then a billion years of technological post-humanism, transhumanism, civilization beyond that, what would that feel like? It would be a big gap. I'll just tell you now. How could you get it so that it's 50-50, so that there's no difference? It's one and the same. It's the living dead universe, the dead living person thing. Rock, organic being, tree, plant, organism. You interlace them. You interlace them as if you're braiding, just like the present moment and the past, present, and future, how they're braided so that through this trinary flipping of your perceptual system, they're all one and the same. You do that with the eternal system, with the temporary system. You braid them to the point where every night you have the perception of going into this eternal state and living one complete eternity. And every day you have the perception of living one complete life as a day. And as such, the two, one was any distance or length because it's technological, and one was perceivably one day by day, 1 day per day length, but even then, without anything to compare that to, that's on a sliding scale. And so you braid them, and you end up having, for every day, you have an equivalent amount of time of technological consciousness, and it alternates between one and the other to the point where you smush them together and you get this braided format. At that point, in the life version, you wake up, and you're here, you go to bed, and you're there, and you experience both, basically. And then say you die from this version and go back to the simulated version, or whatever you want to call it. You live there, you go to bed, or whatever you want to call it. You die there for one, you live one life and then die, and you wake up and live a life here in the organic version. And they're forever braided in differing scales, and wider and smaller scales, to the point where it could be 1 day here, or you could live one life here, or you could live the length of one civilization each time you die from the simulated version and come into here. And you can keep bumping it up and up and up, so you never have the same thing twice. By braiding them, by interlacing them, they basically found the way to maintain immortality and not have one overpower the other, because that's how you get imbalance, and imbalance is the basis, the foundation of forgetfulness. Forgetfulness is death, basically. And that is done through technological ascension, and for that to work, they first had to find people who organically ascended so that they could reason and figure out their way around hyperspace. And that's basically a shortcut for people who don't have any other method, although it's kind of like saying a shortcut to enlightenment, which is more like saying, well, if you take the shortcut, you don't get there. you're crap out of luck. So it's up to everyone on their own terms. Eventually we all turn into frequency bands that exist eternally, and we're actually there now. There's no motion, there's no movement, there's no physicality. We're just dreaming fibers of these energy bands in an extended morphogenic field of the cosmos. But however you go back is your storyline for this round of eternity. Because there's multiple eternities. There's multiple infinities as well, mathematical infinities, finite infinities, repeating, I think, infinities, or infinite infinities. There's a kid that's talking about these. He's really young, and he's talking about the complex ideas, or some of them, but they lead into basically all these things. They had to deal with fuzzy logic and fuzzy math and set theory, I think chaos theory. I can't think some of the more complicated subjects, but those are dealing with the issues with infinity, eternity, computing, and stimulating consciousness, and computing reason and logic on a level where if you ask a computer its version of morality, it's not going to give you any. It's always relative to a computer. Yet you can say that for a person, but it's not true, because people have a sense of feeling, and that sense of feeling is the spirit, and that spirit is what's eternal, and that's why the technological version is not the overall version of what you call ascension. It's just emerging with the spirit. And in the same sense, we can be here in this simulator to escape it. As well, we can root down here and, in a way, dominate it through peace and love. But that's not dominating, that's basically bringing it together and empowering it. And it could also be seen as a trick if we're, it's a simulator, get out. Well, maybe the people who want to dominate over war and fear and hate are just telling people that so that they can rule over the whole thing. There's a whole bunch of possibilities, it's pretty much whatever we want. Although there are issues with the time collapse and certain scenarios as far as having a limited opportunity to merge with a spiritual view and level because of that time dilation, that natural tendency, in that we basically want to merge with eternity in a way that allows our conscious perception to remain and transfer through as far as our memories, and that if we go out of sync for too long, that might not be applicable. So there are issues basically with the time limit and things like that. But and then the next, this isn't the second video that I had to do. I still have to do that, which is based upon a write-up that I had in the last video I did on simulation and I can't even think of virtual reality dreaming, going in and out of the simulator, and weird stuff like that. In the previous video, I still have to finish part 2 of that video. But another topic next that I want to talk about is the energy system, and how there's basically a deviation between a heart-centered, like feeling-based awareness, based awareness, and a sexual, sacral, mental, energy-based awareness, and that by activating our systems, we polarize to one or the other, and that in some cases, neutrality or lack of activation is the key for that situation or time, and in other situations, a heart-based activation is, it will prove something, and for other people, they would choose sexual mental activation because that's what they want to experience. So I'll probably talk about that next, if not part 2, and I'm going to begin working on the slideshow for the other talk sooner or later. And then there's another talk in a car randomly with a couple people, which is kind of contaminated with music and other people talking, so I don't know. But yeah, check it out. Thinking about it, there's a couple of videos coming out. I'm going to do one of those videos where I'm going to list a bunch of producers and videos that I either know will be able to inform you of certain aspects of the situation, or basically that, or have worked with myself. So you think about that, the energy system activation, and as well, when the boundaries dissolve, that's where transcendence or neutrality is found, and that's where you get neutrality from, not necessarily from an activation in a heartfelt path or another path. Although there is an understanding that emotions can be used against us, and emotions being polarized, happy, sad, okay, all that is an illusion. And joy or presence of being, okay, those aren't polarized. Those are just a pure charge of raw energy. That's the idea behind that. That if you're bipolar blissed out and it's like, I did it, I activated, that's something feeding on you. If you're literally glowing and there's no particular angle or way to describe why that's happening, or not why, because it's kind of bipolar in itself, but to describe how that's being expressed, that it's just an all-over effect, that's joy, that's true presence of being, presence of self, which is selfless because it can't be defined. That's the whole point. Alright, now I'm going to stop rambling now.